It's my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. He's an American radio and podcasting personality, best known for his career as Bald Bryan, co-host and sound effects guru for the Guinness World Record-breaking podcast, The Adam Carolla Show. Those of us that grew up know who Adam Carolla is and how funny he is. Currently, he's the host of the official podcast of Los Angeles Magazine, a 14-year brain tumor survivor, and author of the New York Times best-selling book, Shrinkage. Please put your hands together and let's give a very, very warm welcome to Bryan Bishop.
Hello, everyone. Well, I made it on stage standing up, so this is it's already a huge success. Thank you to the ABTA for asking me and my wife Christie to come and talk today. I want to thank Ralph DeVito, the CEO, President and CEO, of course, the conference co-chairs, Susanna Chang and Dr. James Liu, the ABTA, of course. 50 years, you guys, 50 years of the ABTA. This is amazing. Put your hands together. And we're back in person after, I don't even know how many years, but virtual conferences, and now we're back in person. It's great to see so many people here, so many smiling faces, survivors, caregivers, medical professionals. Thank you guys for being here. Sincerely, it's my pleasure and my treat to be here. When I was initially approached, first of all, thanks to my wife for encouraging me not to delete the email from ABTA that said, will you be our keynote speaker? And I was like, is this real? And so I checked, and it was real, and I'm here, and I'm thrilled to be here. And when I initially started thinking about this speech a few months ago, I'm flipping through my own book, but I don't do that often. I'm looking through my book for inspiration, thoughts, things to talk about, and it was surprising how much of the content of my book centered around the theme of hope. And the theme of this conference is meeting hope head on. I thought it was perfect, and what a wonderfully kismet moment it was. And when I set out to write my book, Shrinkage, I swear to you, I had no expectations whatsoever for the book. I really thought it was just going to be a lark, right? A look behind the scenes for fans of our show who wanted to know what happened that first year when I was diagnosed, and my fiance, then wife, was taking care of me and the recovery. And I thought, this would be a fun inside joke for the people who listen to the show. Maybe some of you at that point listen to the show or are familiar with my story. I never had any expectations beyond that. And the fact that it became a New York Times bestseller, and I get emails and tweets almost every day. To this day, I got an email yesterday from people who discovered the book or say, my dad was just diagnosed with this, or my cousin, my friend. I don't know what to do for them. And I'm giving them your book because I think it can be hopeful or give them some semblance of, hey, this guy is still here. He had the same thing as you. And the fact that people often don't know what to do in that situation as a friend, as a loved one, and the fact that they look to me in my book, this silly thing that I had no expectations for, is almost impossible to believe. I did, and you're all going to get a copy, so maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but you'll soon realize I peppered the book with tumor tips, things to advise maybe newly diagnosed people on things that mostly practical. Like some things were like, get a credit card just designated for medical expenses, easier to keep track of. You're going to get a lot of points. Not practical advice like that. But then so many of those tumor tips as I'm reading back over them, are centered around the theme of hope. So I want to share just a couple with you and give you an idea of what they're about and what I'm sure a lot of us have lived through. Number one of the tumor tips I put in the book was find a doctor you believe in. That doesn't mean you have to be their best friend. It doesn't mean you have to even like them. There's plenty of doctors who, apologies to all the doctors in the room, plenty of doctors who just aren't that fun, but they're really good at treating brain tumors. So that's the doctor you want. Everyone here has their diagnosis story, I'm sure. When we were first diagnosed, when I was first diagnosed, we were unfortunately being treated briefly by a doctor who had pretty poor bedside manner, and we ended up in this clinic, and it was the first time anyone had said cancer to us. We ended up in a cancer clinic, and we're sitting in this medical exam room, and he comes in, and he hands me a pamphlet, and he starts going, "I'm so sorry this is happening to you." I'm like, "What? What's happening to me? I don't know what's happening." And he slowly explained that I have a brain tumor, and this and that. And I cut to the chase. I said, "Doc, realistically, what are we looking at here?" And he said, 6 months to a year. And that was 2009, 2 months before we were due to get married. Almost to the day. And maybe some of you have experienced this. This is the first time in my life that I've experienced a cold sweat. Like I'm sweating, but I'm freezing as I'm processing this information. But I swear to you, and I don't know if this is ignorance or false bravado or whatever it was, my very first thought was, well, that's not going to be me. That won't be me. And we'll figure something out. Spoiler alert, we figured something out. I'm still here. Second tour tip I want to share with you guys, and I tell this to people all the time because so many people are obsessed with statistics, right? I mean, like the numbers are out there. We all know the numbers for your specific type of tumor or your treatment or whatever. And the tip I always tell people is be your own statistic. People read the stats and they get terrified, rightly so. I think we went home after learning about this diagnosis and being advised not to Google it. Of course, the first thing we did was Google it. And it said something like 80% of people with this particular type of tumor are dead within 6 months or a year. And that was another cold sweat moment. But as I realized, and now I tell people all the time, you're your own statistic. You are a unique set of circumstances, and all these stats and all these numbers that float around there, yeah, they're scary and yeah, they're real, but keep in mind, that's not necessarily you. If 80% of people die in 6 months, let's say, for example, man, that's everybody. That's people who don't have access to great health care, who don't want access to great health care, who can't travel to get the great health care, who don't want to go through the treatment, are old or older or immunocompromised, or something is going on, perhaps, that skews those statistics. And if you're a young person, or I deal a lot with young adult cancer, so keep in mind who I'm talking to mostly. But you're you. You're not that person that is in the statistic. You're the person that is your own statistic. And that, honestly, gives people a lot of hope. Number 3, you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching you. And weirdly, you never know who's going to be inspired by you just by you doing what you do. We went through radiation, chemotherapy, the whole, the regular treatment in 2009, frankly, probably now too. And on my last day, our last day of radiation, Christie, my wife, came with me to every appointment, and I came out. I had the mask, the mask they stretch over your face for radiation, and I came out looking like a lizard every time with that imprint on my face. And on my last day of radiation, I promised my wife, foolishly, again, this might be the foolishness, the ignorance bliss. But I said to Christie, I said, we're going to dance out of this radiation center. meaning it would be a triumphant exit on our part. Fast forward a few weeks, and it was the last day of radiation. And I kept my promise. We danced. It was a very awkward dance. I mean, I was not in the best shape physically. Probably was my worst. At that point, it was probably my lowest point. I mean, physically, we started to deteriorate. The tumor was growing, but I kept my promise, and we danced right there in the reception area as I gathered all my things, and they gave me a little diploma saying, you're completed your radiation, and we kind of wobbled awkwardly for a little impromptu dance, and all of a sudden, we get a tap on the shoulder, and it's this guy who I'd never seen, because you get to be friends with people in the waiting room. You see them every day, and you either become friendly with them or you know them. Like, oh, I recognize that person. I didn't recognize this guy. And he said, he told us his name was Amin. And he said, hey, I'm Amin, and I'm watching you two dance. And today, I get emotional thinking about it. So give me a second. He said, today's my first day of radiation. And, I remember he said to us, he said, I'm really scared. But if I can look like you guys on my last day, I think I'll have done pretty well. And I said, great. I'm so glad I could be an inspiration to you. I was just dancing with my fiance. We weren't even married at that point. And he said, can I get your contact information? I'm sure I'll have questions. I'm sure I'll want to reach out. I said, absolutely. So we traded numbers, and he said, thanks. I remember his brother was there, and his brother had just flown in from overseas, the Middle East, I think, like somewhere really far away. And Amin had traveled from far away also to get the best care they could find. And so we traded numbers and said goodbye. And that was my last time in the radiation center, thankfully. But I never heard from him. I expected to. I thought I'd get a text or a phone call or something, but I never heard from the guy. And I don't even, excuse me, I don't even know if he's alive today. I hope he is, and I hope he's doing well. I hope you're watching, I mean. But that day, when he was at his lowest, or his most scared, I was at my lowest, he was the most scared, I inspired the guy. We inspired him just by doing our dumb little dance and being ourselves. So it was just a lesson that I learned that day, we learned, that you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching you. And deriving some inspiration. All right, enough of that. Who wrote that crap? I'll lighten it up a little bit. Thank you for indulging me. Everyone here, I'm sure, whether you're a patient or an advocate or a caregiver or what have you, we've all gotten advice, most of it unsolicited, and I'm sure everyone means well. If they're giving you advice, they mean well. They want to impart, they want to let you know they're thinking of you, they want to let you know they care, they're trying to impart some wisdom, but often that advice is bad. So here's the worst advice you're going to get as a cancer patient. Number one, live every day like it's your last. Do you have any idea how exhausting that would be? Like if literally, imagine tomorrow is your last day on earth. You know for a fact it's your last day, and it's like, all right, well, here we go. I'll be gone the next day, so tomorrow's going to be the last day. You go to the bank, you drain your account. You take all the money out. You don't bother to charge any of your devices all day because why? Yeah, the first thing you do in the morning, you go to work, and you tell your boss you hate them. You quit your job on the spot. You drive around all day with the gas tank just about empty, because why fill it up? Yeah, you don't bother charging your devices. Like I said, you leave your car running in the neighbor's driveway, because again, not your problem. When the car eventually runs out of gas, the neighbor comes over and is like, hey, is something wrong? You're like, I don't even like you. I never liked you. Your house is ugly. And you polish off that expensive bottle of bourbon or wine that you've been saving for a special occasion, and then you do it all again the next day. Because you're living every day like it's your last. Bad advice number 2. And I know we've all heard this, and I swear these people mean well, but can I say, damn it? Damn it. Don't say, be positive. I know what they mean. Having a positive attitude is 100% important. That is very crucial to your treatment and recovery, but it's really hard to be positive all the time. And what I've realized over the years after hearing this a lot, what they mean is not be positive. What they mean is be resilient. Be resilient and figure out what it's going to take to pick up the pieces. Because you're going to have bad days, bad moments, bad diagnoses, bad scans, bad tests, bad news, whatever it is. It's going to suck. You're going to have bad months, maybe months on end. How do you pick up the pieces, and how do you put it back together, and how do you find the strength to soldier on in the face of what can feel extremely bleak? So yeah, being positive is important, but it's more important to be resilient. And finally, you'll get this a lot. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't sweat the details. There was a whole series of books back in the 90s. I don't know if you guys remember. Don't sweat the small stuff. It was about don't let the little things get in the way. Don't let them weigh you down. Don't let them take your focus off the prize. And I'm here to tell you, sweating the small stuff is great. It is awesome to be able to sweat the small stuff. I remember when I started to recover, for a while, I was on a walker full time. I was in a wheelchair for a short period of time, getting around, doing basic things. You all know the pill routine. You got between 5 and 15 pills to take every day. I would sit on the couch, and because the radiation affected my left side so dramatically, I would put the pills on my shirt and practice taking them from my left hand and putting it in my mouth, which is difficult now. Back then, it was virtually impossible. It took 45 minutes at certain points just to get the pills into my mouth with my left hand. But I did it, and when I started to recover, started to be able to use my left side, started to be able to walk without a walker, I remember we left sub-envelope. It was a bill or something in the mailbox, and the mail carrier typically takes it and puts it in the mail for you. Saves you a trip to the post office or the mailbox or whatever it is. And I left an envelope there, and the mail person didn't take it. And I was furious. I said to Christie, we were just married at the time, and I'm like, the mail carrier didn't take our letter, now it's going to be late, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going on and on about this stupid letter, and I stop and I realize this is the worst part of my day. What a treat to have this letter be the worst part of my day. I'm not sweating the big stuff, I'm sweating the small stuff. When the ABTA reached out to me, first, like I said, I really did almost delete the email because we got time, I can tell this. I did this stupid thing last year where I donated to charity, a different charity every day of the year. For 365 days, I donated to 365 charities. Yeah, it sounds very altruistic. Thank you, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, you get a lot of emails. You got a lot of emails popping in your inbox, and one popped up from the ABTA, and amongst many others, and I thought, that's a group I donated to last year. They must just be sending me a form letter saying, thank you, please send more money. But I read it, and it was like, would you consider being our keynote speaker this year? I thought, yeah, I would be honored to do it. And I asked my wife, the esteemed Christie Bishop, I asked her, I'm like, should I do this? She's like, absolutely you should. And so we got to talking with some of the members of the ABTA, the people who put on the conference specifically, and it didn't take long, honestly, into the planning process when they were asking, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to do on stage? I said, it strikes me that it's not just going to be patients there, but advocates, caregivers, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's almost going to be an equal number. So we would be very smart to ask my wife to present with me, to give the caregiver perspective, and to shed some light on what they go through. And it's not easy, and it's not obvious for most people. It is for us, but for the people watching, not an obvious thing. So without further ado, my caretaker, my care partner, my wife, Christie Bishop.
We got a hug and kiss. I'm so proud of you. Hi, everyone. I'm the esteemed Christie Bishop, apparently. And I also made it up the stairs. I have no excuse to trip and fall, but I didn't. Thank you so much, honey. I'm very glad that he didn't delete the email, 100%. But at the same time, I tell Bryan this at home every day, and I'm going to tell you now in front of God and country and casts of over 1,000, I believe, with the virtual listeners. You are a hero. You are. You're an inspiration. You are. I think about what you've been through. I think about what we've been through. From literally just a death diagnosis or prognosis of 6 to 12 months to Temodar and chemotherapy and radiation burns and losing your mobility and my grandparents lending you their walkers. It sounds funny now, but I will never forget the look on my 80-plus-year-old grandparents' faces as they literally said, like, this is backwards. This is backwards. We're supposed to go and do this. He was 30. I was 29. Right? So what do we know about this? We don't know anything. But I love you so much, and thank you so much for having me and inviting me. Thank you also to the ABTA, please. And to Emily and to Mindy, you guys have just been our angels through this process, so I'd be remiss to not say thank you guys so much, wherever Mindy is too. Yes, hi, there you are. Okay, so I'm here to share the caregiver and the patient advocate perspective. And it's been, I was doing the math this morning because at this point in time, I have to do the math, which is a massive privilege in this situation. It's been 14 years since I was almost 15. I was 29 when Bryan was diagnosed. He was 30. We were about to be married in 3 months, and now I'm 44, and he turns 45 next Tuesday. So what an immense privilege. I have to remember to click for myself. It's weird to do my own intro slide, the whole thing. So, okay. Thinking about the caregiver perspective, let's put that to the side for a second. As an adult, life is just hard. We have so much to think about. Like, who are we? What do we identify with? Who and what are we responsible for? What do we want to be? How do we want to grow up? Even in our 40s and 50s, what do we want to be as we grow up? Like, forget cancer for a second. There's just enough on our plates. But then cancer strikes. Sometimes people have an inkling that something's going on. Other times it hits out of the blue, and every single thing is covered in static. I can still, to this day, remember just the static that went into my brain as we're sitting there with this, I'm an awful doctor, he's not our doctor, who handed Bryan, he rolled up his little stool to us and presented the pamphlet, turned it. He did tell us he had taken the liberty of highlighting the sections that were relevant to our case. And it said a patient's guide to brain cancer. And that's how we found out. I'm just gonna give a little bit more detail because that's my job, is providing the detail. But the static that went through my brain at that moment and his cold sweat moment was beyond. It was surreal. But at the same time, everything that I just mentioned, your identity, who you're responsible for, what you believe in, everything has to be redefined under the lens of cancer and what that means. moving forward. So I'm going to talk about 5 areas in our life that changed. And again, this is just my personal experience and our personal experience. But there's so much more to this. But for the sake of time, I'm going to talk about our life, marriage, and changes there. Changes in parenthood. That's our beautiful daughter, Tessa, who turned 7 in 2 weeks. Friendships and how those change, as well as what happens at work. Because unfortunately, life doesn't stop. We still have responsibilities. And all of these things, again, change under the guise of cancer and what that means. So your life is turned upside down, right? Okay, everyone knows this fine. But the analogy I like to say is you're carrying a bag, whether it's a merce or a purse or whatever it is, and it gets flipped upside down. But it's not that it just gets flipped upside down and like things kind of fall out. It's like the world shakes the purse as hard as it can to get everything out, and you're left looking at a scattering of pieces. And you have no idea where to start. You don't know where your wallet is. You don't know where your lip balm is. You don't know where your phone charger is. You don't know where your kids' Cheerios are. You have no idea, and you start from scratch. Now, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I find it helpful in my own life to say there's BC and there's AD in the cancer world. We live in a before cancer and after diagnosis world, and I know this is a shared experience. If we all literally, and you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do this, like you can close your eyes and you can remember the exact moment of diagnosis, where you were, the chair rolling, our knees touching, that creepy doctor, the pamphlet. It was highlighted in orange, not in yellow. It's like the movie Inside Out. It becomes a core memory. And after the AD, everything is different because confusion and stress and overwhelm, and sometimes panic just totally set in. But then at our age, 29 and 30, like I said, isolation set in, because what 29 and 30-year-old have any idea what we're going through? No, I'll tell you, not one, and that's a privilege on their part. No one should understand what we were going through at the time. But because of that, caregivers and patients, we grieve the loss of the life that we once knew 5 minutes before, a week before, 2 weeks before. And that first month is pure chaos, trying to figure out, here's the appointments. What do I take to the appointment? What do I talk to the doctor about? I don't know any of these words. What are these therapies named after? Like, there are some big companies here. Could we work on that? Like, how do I pronounce this? What's the clinical name versus what's the generic name? Like, what do I do? How do I gather the confidence to stop the doctor and say, hold on a second, I really don't understand anything that you're saying. Can we bring it down a notch? Can we talk in layman's terms? Just help us out. 5 days ago, we were planning our wedding and we were going to happy hours. Now we're here in the radiation center every single day. So life just changes in every possible way. And then there's this rush to get educated. Again, Bryan said we went online. The poor doctor was like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to be pruning my roses, is what he told us. And whatever you do, you young kids in the internet, don't go home and look this up. But have a good weekend. So, how do you find sources that are even legit? Obviously, the ABTA, thank God. But back then, there was hardly anything. Second, marriage. For those of us who have partners or are married or, just have someone really special and a loved one in our life, everything changes there too. There's a dynamic shift from partner to patient, and that is it's so hard. I remember in the early days, again, we were engaged, and one of the strongholds of our relationship is communication. We tell each other everything, or at least I think we do. We probably tell each other too much, to be honest. And when cancer hit, we were dancing on eggshells around each other because he didn't want to tell me how scared he was and he was processing. I didn't want to tell him how scared I was because then I felt as a caregiver, which I didn't even consider myself back then, I didn't want to contribute. In my head, I'm if I tell him how terrified I am, I'm going to make this worse for him. I'm going to make him sicker. It was a weird, it was a mistruth in my own head, right? A superstition. But because of that, cancer was hard enough, and what we were going through was hard enough, but not being able to communicate in the way that we normally did. And it was probably, a month, 2 months, and we finally sat down and we're let's lay it all out. We have to lay it out. How are you feeling? What do you need? Christie, how are you feeling? Which people don't ask caregivers, by the way. Like, no one asks, how are you? But I'm lucky to be surrounded by a patient and a husband and a family who often asks, no, really, how are you? But communication is really tough. We as caregivers, care partners, we again need to find a new name for this. So like we should do the QR code Q&A, like how can we rebrand the caregiver name? We take a back seat, and it makes perfect sense. But at the same time of that, we're adding responsibilities that we never asked for. I talked about, the stress going to appointments. We're managing medication schedules. Like, I sat right next to Bryan during that 45-minute time on the couch when he he hated this couch too. It was so uncomfortable. And he would just try to do this, and he'd get here, and the pill would fall out. And he would be like, oh, and I'm like, we can do this? We got nowhere to go, because we were also unemployed. That's a whole different story, because it was the recession. Everyone was unemployed. But I remember that. And then trying to navigate insurance, because we were on COBRA. All of this stuff caregivers don't ask for in a relationship, much less a marriage. And then intimacy. Nobody talks about intimacy, but it's not like you're getting wild after a cancer diagnosis, right? You're like, let's get crazy. No, you're not. Intimacy changes, and sometimes it stops altogether. But intimacy, you have to redefine it. Go to bed holding hands. Like, intimacy for us became after he had radiation burns on the back of his head. I would rub the ointment into the, these little divots, whatever, here to make him comfortable and help him heal. Sometimes it's just getting him the smoothie that he wanted that was halfway across town, and I was like, I don't care, let's get the smoothie. You really want the smoothie? I remember for his 30th birthday, he was really not well. His weight was really low. Radiation and chemotherapy had really taken a terrible toll on him. And all he wanted was this ungodly mix of guacamole, cheesecake, a Jamba Juice, like mango smoothie, and sushi. It's like, will it blend? It's one of those situations. And I went to like 4 different places, and I got that. And that, sitting there, that's intimacy, right? So you have to redefine it. And I realize I'm going out of order here, and I'm doing it on purpose. The last thing I want to say is, as this goes on and on and on, and if you have the privilege of it going on and on and on, anger and resentment and hurt and fear creep into your bones as a caregiver, and that's okay. But what we have to remember in our partnerships is that our partner is not the cancer. They didn't ask for this. Our partner is not the cancer. Thank you. It's so important when you want to throw something, hit something, scream, kick, like our kids have tantrums. It's an out-of-body experience. Direct it at the cancer, not your partner, because they don't want this. Friendship. This is a hard one. I struggle with this one now, 15 years later. Cancer changes your address book. The people that you think are going to be there, like, oh my God, these people and these people and these, but they are going to show up, and you're waiting for that phone call. The phone call doesn't come, and they disappear. And not only are you grieving, which a lot of people can't identify this as grief, we are grieving, even though we're still alive and dealing with this, grieving cancer and everything that comes with it. We're now grieving friendships. We didn't ask to grieve friendships. But what I have to say about that is I have realized, and honestly, as recent as last week, I came to this very astute conclusion. I was very proud of myself. But we've evolved in this journey and what we've seen and our perspective. And I now found a lot of peace that some people truly cannot come along with us on this journey. They can't. And that's okay. It feels awful, but it's okay, because that's their journey, and it's our job to let them go. Because the more we hold on to that hurt, it's not going to serve us. It won't serve us at all. And I will tell you what, and I'm sure everyone in this room has recognized this, other angels take their place. I'm getting emotional about it because I'm going through it right now with a friend. And other angels have taken her place. It's not easy. But at the same time, we're going to switch real fast. Harry Potter, everybody knows Harry Potter? We are reading book number 5 to our daughter right now. For those who are not Harry Potter fans, it's called Order of the Phoenix. And check it out, highly recommended. There's a part in the beginning of this story. where the kids are on the train, Hogwarts Express, and they get to the lake, and there's a boat. It's like planes, trains, and automobiles to get to Wizarding School. But there are carriages that take the students, up to the school. And the first few years, the carriages are moving as though they're not pulled by anything. There's an invisible force moving the carriages. And in book number 5, Harry has just come off of a very horrible experience where he's witnessed the death of a friend, Cedric Diggory. Spoiler alert, I apologize if you haven't read it now, it's not my problem. And he gets to school, he sees the carriages, and he sees what's pulling them. And there's these creepy, awful, skeletal horse-like situations that are almost like Pegasus as well. And he's like, who sees this? This is crazy. Who sees these things? And Ron and Hermione, his ride or die BFFs, are like, bro, you better sit down because something's wrong. There's nothing there. Enter Luna Lovegood, the quirky Luna Lovegood, who has seen so much death and so much suffering and so much trauma in her life. She says, Harry, I see them. He's like, what? You said what? You're a little crazy. Am I crazy too? She's like, no, only if you've seen death or something really terrible can you see, and they're called thestrals. Can you see the thestrals? We can see the thestrals. Some of our friends can't see the thestrals, and that's okay. That's totally okay, because other people who have and who have been there and have seen it and experienced it and felt it, they take their place. And there's nothing more beautiful than that. Bryan's advice to me on this is, you can't control and you can't judge your friends for their reactions. You can only control your own. And I know that it's a generic statement. I'm not dismissing it. It's beautiful and wonderful. But it's so true, because I used to get so upset. But now I lean in and prioritize the relationships that there's no pretense. There's let's just get into it. How are you? How am I? How are your kids? How is your partner? How's work? It's awful. That's okay. Tell me why. And not the BS, right? Because they're there for your highest highs, and they're the first ones there reaching out during your lowest lows. All right, 2 more. So parenting, as the caregiver and the patient advocate, we also become the always on, the designated parent, if you will. Normal parenthood takes a village. This cancer caregiving takes a village, it takes a city, it takes a country, it takes a continent, it takes everybody and everything everywhere at once. And I want to be careful, because there is a chance that our daughter is watching part of this, but knowing 6-year-old attention spans, hopefully she's moved on to something else by now. We do our best, and I do my best in particular, to protect her from this reality as much as that I can. When she asks the hard questions, it's parenting 101 kind of, but I only answer the question that she's asked, and I don't go beyond that. She knows Daddy has a boo-boo. She knows his boo-boo is here. She asks, am I gonna get Daddy's boo-boo? Is Daddy's boo-boo gonna go away? And it's a very matter of fact. It's like there's no association of emotion with it. She's just curious. The other day we're in the bathroom and she says, Mommy, is Daddy gonna die from his boo-boo? And I said, maybe. She was like, she's very good at math. What's like the ratio? What do you think? And I'm like, oh my God, we're taking bets now, okay. She's like, is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? I was like, honey, nobody knows. I was like, nobody knows except for God, universe, spirit. I was like, but Daddy's here right now. And that's enough, and that's amazing. The last thing we want to do is say to her, Daddy has cancer, Daddy has a tumor. And she goes to her second grade friends at school and say, my daddy has cancer. And without context and knowing this journey that this hero has been on, somebody says something to her that absolutely crushes her. Saying you don't look great is one thing. Saying your father's going to die at school is totally different. So we do our best to protect her. And obviously to keep things optimistic and positive. Be positive at home. Going into that, one of the things that I think we often forget to do as adults is to play. We're so serious. We don't play, we don't laugh, we're not silly, we don't dance party. Lean into childhood. Lean into the crazy, magical amazingness and the stress that kids bring. I remember when Bryan was very, very, very ill during the pandemic. He was down to 130 pounds. He was sleeping a ton, and he had hand, foot, and mouth from the one therapy he was on. It's just pervasive. He couldn't eat, he couldn't sleep, he was having diarrhea all the time. Not TMI, we all understand in here. And I would get Tessa up, or she would get me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would get that stroller. She was 3.5 years old, and we would take that stroller outside, 6:30 in the morning. And I would take her to the high rent district, half a mile away. And I called it the Disney neighborhood because there was one house, it had a tower. I said, oh, look, it's Rapunzel's house. There was another one that looked just like Belle's cottage from Beauty and the Beast. Look, it's Belle. And then, Mommy, can we go say hi to Belle? Do you think Maurice, the inventor, her daddy, is there? I said, no, we can't. We can't go. I still say, no, we can't go. And then there was one that looked like the Incredibles house syndrome, which she was terrified of. It was like the villain, never wanted to go. But those became our core memory Disney neighborhood walks. And I leaned in so hard to the joy and the energy and the innocence that she brought me during those times that we looked at ducks and we looked at lizards and we looked at flowers and we literally stopped and enjoyed every single second of life. It's a reminder to do that in our own lives as well, as parents and as caregivers. On the other side of that, the healthy parent is the safe space. I had a therapist explain this to me during the pandemic when we were going through this really hard time. And she said, Tessa was really acting out. And she said, you're the safe one. You're the strong one. You're the healthy one. She's testing you to see if you're the safe space and if she can lash out in all of these ways. And it would make me crazy. And she said, whatever you do, do not react in her moments of dysregulation. Again, it's kind of parenting 101, but I didn't. And I let her have those moments. And there was one moment last November. I've since asked him, can we just stop going to the hospital? Because we've been there a lot. And he got the flu. And we didn't know it was the flu. It was November 2022. And he had the flu for a week and a half, and it just, tested negative for COVID, and we're waiting it out, and he wasn't getting better. And I texted his neuro-oncologist one night as Bryan's literally delusional in front of my face. His eyes are rolling, he's nonsensical. And I was like, this is bad. I normally know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he's like, I think you need to get him to the hospital. So we got him in the hospital. My parents, thank God, they live 5 minutes away. They whisked in. Our daughter's sitting 3 feet away from me watching Bluey. Shout out to Bluey. If anybody knows Bluey, it's like the best kid show of all time. And check it out. And she's like, Mommy, are you okay? And I'm crying, but trying not to face her. And I said, I'm okay. I'm just worried about Daddy. Well, turns out Daddy was near septic. He had double pneumonia, not just the flu. Influenza A, double pneumonia. You've never seen, it's funny when you go into ERs and you know how serious it is, but they don't want to tell you how serious it is, but you can tell by the amount of people that kind of slowly but fast come to your side and whisk you through. It was very much like that. But the second night he was in the hospital, I came home and she lost her ever-loving mind, and I was her safe space. And I gave her that safe space. So give your kids the safe space to be that parent. And also, it's okay to lose your shit and walk away temporarily if you need to do that. You're not a bad person. You just need your own time. And lastly, work. Caregiving can absolutely work to your advantage here, without a doubt. The reality is that so many of us have to work still. We get it. But you need to decide how and when and where you share your story and with whom, because it's not safe for everyone. And we know that, right? There's safe and compassionate tribes that you should find, but there's also people who are like, oh no, something's wrong, X status. You just have to figure out and be safe about it. My perspective has made me the leader that I am today, which I'm very, very proud of, because nothing is life or death at work, no matter how much your employer wants you to believe otherwise. I realize this is the wrong audience for this because these are neurosurgeons and neuro-oncologists, so everything is life or death. But for the 90% of the rest of us, it's not life or death, whether that deadline hits or not. And then, keep calm. When your team comes to you freaking out, I was leading 50 people during the pandemic. I helped them through miscarriages, suicide attempt of a parent, horrible, horrible things. But it's this perspective that got me through it. And then finally, if you need to take a break, take a break. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Because I think the last thing I'm going to say is, in the theme of holding out hope or holding on to hope, you hold on to hope for the patient, but you have to hold on to hope for yourself, because you are yourself away from the patient too. And should all go wrong and sideways, and should the worst happen, you're gonna be okay. The reason why is because you're not alone. Look at this room, look online. We have others, we have support systems, and together we can make it through this. I think we're going to take some questions now.
Hi. I'm going to give you one of these. I'll give it to you. Perfect. And then if you can give this one to Bryan. Of course. Get comfortable. I'm surprising you with a Q&A. I'm going to do it because why not?
That sounds great.
Thank you both so much for sharing your story.
Please.
It's the same story but different.
Yeah, for
Like
different
hearing
angles.
it from Christie's point of view and then yours,
Yeah.
same but different. And it's so wild, right? Okay, I'm just going to shoot some. Well, first of all, I want to say, can we give them a round of applause for even doing that? So, Bryan and Christie, they are going to be sticking around for a meet and greet during the cocktail reception. You can obviously meet them, get a photo, get an autographed copy of Bryan's book, Shrinkage, Manhood, Marriage, and the Tumor That Tried to Kill Me. So be sure to line up near the ropes to get your spot in line, so don't forget to do that. All right, so here are some. I'm just going to kind of rapid fire these. Why did you even decide, Bryan, to write a book, share your story, and be so public?
An agent approached me. A friend of mine wrote a book, and it was great. It was funny. It was about her pregnancy, and her agent was a fan of the show, and he sent me a business card and said, hey, I think he knew, I've been talking about the story at this point on the podcast for a few years. And he said, hey, I think you got a great story. I think people will get a lot from it. Would you consider writing a book? Little did he know, I was a creative writing major in college and a journalism major before that. And so writing was easy for me, like actually the physical process. So I said, yeah, can do. And so I dragged my heels for a year and writing an outline, finally got it to him, and he shopped it around and sold it. And the idea, like I said, was just to give our listeners and our fans a laugh, a little peek behind the curtain. The ancillary benefit, and at this point, the main benefit, has been people finding it useful, reading it and like getting something from it useful, not just a laugh or not just, a giggle here and there. Like actually the tumor tips help people, or just the idea of our story, people find it inspiring. So it was a bit of a reverse engineering. Like I didn't have high expectations beyond maybe a few people find it funny. And now here it is, people find it inspirational. So it's awesome.
And Christie, same question to you, sort of differently. Did that decision, being so open and public about it, was that okay with you?
When we first started dating, he was on the radio. So we had already had that conversation. I would drive to work and hear him talk about me on the radio. And it was like, whoa, we need to have a little chat. But we didn't know how much it would help people. But I think he's in the book so open and so raw. And it covers the first year. That's it. Like we've got 13 years since then. But I mean, he talks about the horrible constipation from chemotherapy, right? He talks about things that nobody else talks about. And when people read it, not only is it wildly inspirational, people feel it. They're like, oh my God, this is me. This is my partner. This is my dad. You see me. And there was no way we couldn't put that out there.
Yeah.
I'll actually answer the second part of your question, because the idea to go public and to be very open about my treatment, announcing my diagnosis at the time, was a very conscious decision, because the decision beforehand was like, do I talk about this, or do I just slip off and go into treatment? And I realized very quickly, I don't want someone seeing me at the hospital or seeing me around town and thinking, oh my God, what happened to Bryan? Mm-hmm. He's lost 40 pounds and he looks terrible. I keeping that secret inside of me, I can't speak for everyone here, but keeping it inside of me would have been toxic. I wanted, and the ancillary benefit was once I announced it on the podcast, the outpouring of support was incredible.
We're obviously so glad that you shared. To sit down, and I know that you said obviously that you knew how to write, you were a writer, but to put the words down and relive the toughest year, essentially, that could not have been easy for you.
No, it was not. I will admit to getting emotional. I cried a few times writing the books. I had to relive some unpleasant stories that I didn't shove down and get rid of, but things that are unpleasant, you don't like thinking about them. And I remember there's a chapter in the book about family drama, like, difficulties with the family, my family in particular. My family are great people. I love them so much. But cancer, and I spoke on a panel years ago called Just for Guys. It was just for like young men who were diagnosed with cancer. And the moderator of the panel said, show of hands who here has experienced some kind of some sort of familial difficulties. And I'm thinking, oh, probably a few. Every hand went up in the room, every hand. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a really universal thing. And when I came to write my book, maybe like a year later, I went to write that chapter. It was the last chapter I wrote because it was not pleasant. But I was like, this needs to be told. You know what I mean? Like, this is a story that is universal and that can help people who are going through something. So yeah, I'd be remiss. I'd be not doing my duty as the translator of this story to not address that.
Were you surprised at the impact it continues to make?
Oh my God, I was surprised at the time. I'm still surprised. I don't know. What's your perspective on that? People reach out to us all the time and say, "Hey, can you write a message of hope inside the book?"
Yeah. No, it's not a surprise. It's incredible. What's terrifying, though, and this happened last year, was there was a young dad who wrote you an email about his very little daughter who was like 4. And who was going through really, really difficult cancer therapy. And he wrote back a few years later, like 2 years later. And before you even opened it, I remember you just like, he has a habit of, he doesn't cry a lot. He's very stoic, but when he does it, like all comes out at once. He's like, oh, and that happened.
That's true.
And I was like, what? Oh my God, what's going on? And it was a reply from that guy for 2 years later. And he was like, I don't want to open it. I don't want to open it. The girl was fine, and I'm sorry, I really buried the lead.
Just start with that.
Apologize, but we do get some of that sometimes. And on the other side was, they didn't make it, but you gave them hope and you gave them steps and tips and inspiration that we wouldn't have found otherwise because we were so freaked out.
Wow, that's tremendous. Can I ask do you have bad days and what that is like? And this goes for each of you.
Nowadays, our bad days are exacerbated by our daughter. If she's having a bad day, we're having a bad day. So yeah, of course, we have a young man here in the front row named Dominic who is documenting all this on film for a documentary we're making about young adult cancer, and it's been 6+ years we've been working on this movie. Wow. And it's actually being edited right now, so this will be something you guys can see hopefully in a year or so. It's going to be called Growth. Great title. Dom came up with the title. I had nothing to do with it. That's a great title. I bring it up though because Dom was there when we met with our doctor of 14 years, 4 years ago.
It was January of 2020.
Right before, COVID, and my tumor came back. It was a recurrence of my brain tumor. And it was a really, really tough day. Tessa was there, our daughter, who was 3 at the time. Mm-hmm. And you can only imagine getting this news that, hey, sorry, your cancer is back. You're going to go back on treatment and blah, blah, blah. We don't know what's going to happen. And our daughter's 3 years old. She's running around the hospital, the doctor's office, just, doing what 3-year-olds do. Dom's there with his camera trying to film all this. And it's a cacophony of horrible events. So it's all exacerbated by, life. Bad things happen, life happens. Sometimes they happen at the same time.
It's like the 5 areas that I put up on the slides. Mm-hmm. Like, I would say the parenthood aspect makes it really difficult. There was a time just, a month ago, 5 weeks ago, Bryan was finally, his tumor is inoperable. It's in the brainstem or in the pons, and he's never been able to have a biopsy, ever. 5 or 6 weeks ago, he was able to finally have a biopsy and figure out what this is 15 years later, which is unbelievable because it's shifted ever so slightly over to the cerebellum. Well, the week before he was meant to have this like milestone brain surgery, Tessa gets the flu. The surgery is meant to be on Tuesday. Friday, she tests positive for the flu. Sunday, he tests positive for the flu. She's not taking her medication. He's having a heart attack that this procedure is going to get canceled. And I remember she won't take her medication. This bad day, there's not a lot of them, but this was a horrific day. And that's when I said it's okay to lose your shit and walk away temporarily. because I didn't just walk away. I was like a volcano that erupted and walked away. And my parents lived 5 minutes away, and I went to their house because they were out of town, and called my dad on the way, and he's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, everything's fine, just gonna be at your house. You see me on the camera, we're all good. And I got there, and I had forgotten the key to their house. And I was itching. I don't know if anyone can relate to this. I was, like, the fight or flight in me was so strong that day because of his surgery and because of everything else, that my skin was like itching off my body. It was like almost a panic attack. And I remember as I tried to get in the door and realized I forgot the key, I collapsed on the driveway, and I just sobbed for, like, this was 6 weeks ago, like, for 10 minutes, and I just, like, guttural, awful crying, thinking about her sick, he's struggling, we're waiting for this brain surgery, what are we doing, work, all of those things in the background through the lens of this situation. So that's what a really bad day looks like. Otherwise, it's like the mailman didn't take the mail and we're just kind of mad.
Yeah. That's a good bad day.
But everybody needs a good driveway cry. Highly recommend a good driveway cry.
So, I'm going to take that and run with it and talk about anxiety. So I want to ask you as a patient and you as a caregiver, when that anxiety starts to bubble over. I'm not talking about when it just starts to stir. I'm talking about bubbling over.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
That's a great question. I'm a bad person to ask about that because Christie will tell you I am steady waters. You know what I mean?
He is.
I faced death in the face many times.
Tell us how. Like that has to be. There's got to be a method to your madness.
I know. I wish I could tell you, but the problem is that's just me. I have a low resting pulse, and I don't want to, to give you guys false advice like, breathe in and out. What the hell do I know? How do you deal with the anxiety?
I think people have asked me this. Our friends in particular have asked me this because they're like, how is he just not like, oh my God. I think you have been so focused on your own survival since day one that you tune every single other thing out, for better or for worse.
What'd you say?
Exactly. Thank you. It's a professional comedian, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm just kidding. But I really do think he's so honed in on survival and on that job of surviving that, like, whenever there's other types of drama, I'm the one who gets really anxious, and I take all of that on. He will aptly say, like, that advice, I can't do anything about this. Whereas I'm, like, psychotic about it and, bubbling over. He's just like, can't do anything about it. And he's right. So that kind of calms me down.
15 years now, right? 15 years?
14 and a half in between.
Okay, 14 and some change.
Yeah.
Let's talk about hope. We say that a lot here at ABTA, especially with this 50 years in this campaign.
Yeah.
What gave and gives you hope?
There's always something. I'm going to quote your dad, a very wise and smart man who's probably watching right now. Hey, Don, how are you? Good to see you. Get Tessa to bed soon, please. Don.
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
She's tired.
From LA.
Her dad was born with a congenital heart defect. This is the late 1940s. And when he was young, in the early 1950s, he was a little kid, and they opened him up. They did the surgery they used to do, where they just cut him open in hopes of fixing what was wrong with his heart. Realized once they had him open, they couldn't do anything. Sewed him back up. Basically, the way he tells it, basically said, good luck. You probably won't live past your 20s. That's
No,
just how it
55.
goes.
55.
Oh, is that what they
So you
said?
probably won't live past 55. But he
Okay.
was like 11.
I thought it was the
at the time.
1920s.
Yeah.
And so they told him he won't live, very long, but good luck. And Don just celebrated his 75th birthday a couple days ago.
Last week.
Last weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers to Don. That's
Yeah.
right. Your dad's getting a lot of play on this this talk here.
Yeah, but what did he say? What was the quote?
He said to me when I was diagnosed, he said, you don't have to beat this thing. Just live long enough till the next technology, the next advancement, the next whatever comes around. And I'm like, easy for you to say, old man. You've been around for 50 years, little bum ticker. But to his point, not to play favorites, but there's I'm sure it's a big topic of conversation here at this conference. There's a new medication that is designed and works especially well on people with my tumor, with my specific mutation. Thank you. And that's why we had the brain surgery, the biopsy a few weeks ago to find out if I had that mutation. And I do. So I'm eligible to start on this new medication when it becomes FDA approved, which is the most exciting thing that's happened to us since I was put on Avastin 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just one lily pad to the next of hope, right? The next thing's coming. Just hang out as long as you can. It'll be here.
The only thing I'll add to that is I'm big on perspective. And when I look backwards, it's easier as you get older, right? We're not that old. We're halfway through our lives, hopefully. And when I look back at the lowest moments, there was a time where we were going to run out of insurance. We were on state MRIP insurance after COBRA insurance, and we had 3 days until we were running out because they give you a generous $75,000 remit, which we had blown through in a week and a half of chemo and MRIs, and it was ridiculous. And I got a new job literally 3 days before it ran out, and it was the middle of the recession. No one was getting jobs, and I got the job that literally some of my best friends, best mentors, best experience. And when I look backwards, every single thing works out. It just does. I encourage everyone here to look backwards in your life. No matter how horrible things were, sometimes the worst experiences leads to the biggest blessings. And I know it can sound like BS to say, but it's true, at least for us. And you just have to keep that perspective.
Can't be easy though, right?
Oh
Can't
God,
be
no!
easy.
It sounds like happiness and rainbows. It's awful half the time.
Right. I know.
Oh yeah.
Which, by the way, I have to say. So you said Tessie was born. Her birthday is in 2 weeks.
Tessa's birthday is on the
Tessa.
20th.
Yeah, she was meant to be born on his birthday, which is September 13th, and she was a week late.
So my husband's birthday is on the 14th,
All
and my
right.
birthday is on the 18th. And
Virgos.
I mean,
All right.
that is just so amazing
Good.
to me to just
Happy
hear
birthday.
you say
Yes.
it. Yeah, thank you. And to you as well.
Thanks.
And to Tessa too. Thoughts on this and conferences and brains coming together, organizations and, purpose, this purpose. Thoughts on that?
Oh, it's awesome. The concurrent advancement of social media. When we first diagnosed, I think Facebook was the biggest game in town and kind of the only game in town. And now that there's so many avenues, outlets to get this message out and to find a community, to find people who are going through the same thing, who have gone through something similar. And it's so much easier now to find your community. I'm sure there's hashtags on every social media or subreddits or whatever it is for your specific ailments or whatever you're going through, whatever you're dealing with. So this is great, just bringing people together, just seeing that you're not alone. I love just seeing so many smiling faces. It's great. We're all here. We've all won. This is fantastic.
I think about the shared knowledge coming together, and when we're looking through the program, I think we went to USC Keck is here, schools from Miami, hospitals from all over the country are here sharing information in an effort to, let's not say eradicate, but to make this easier and increase survival odds and increase the statistics. There's no competition. It's let's all come together and figure this out. Let's have survivors talk to survivors, caregivers talk to caregivers, the professionals, neurosurgeons, neuro-oncologists, the researchers, the scientists, the nonprofits, all coming together to try to do something powerful is incredible.
I want to close by, first of all, thanking you, obviously, for giving us so much of yourselves. And you've given us so much advice, too. But I do want to just get one line from each of you, advice you'd give to a patient, to a caregiver, a loved one. I hate that word, too, caregiver. I just can't stand
awful.
it. I hate it.
We can
So
talk
yes,
about
let's
that.
come up with that, shall we? Let's create a hashtag and start that.
Let's workshop that.
Yeah. Give us one line.
No, you go. You go.
I've said in my book, and I'll say it now, cancer is relentless, and cancer will never quit. And that's why we have to be relentless, and we must never quit.
I love that.
That's beautiful.
I love that.
I would say, and it's a little trite, but caregivers can often self-isolate, right? And we can often feel isolated, but also it's because we self-isolate because we feel misunderstood. I would say the most important thing from the caregiver perspective is you're not alone, and reach out. Like, it's so hard sometimes to reach out, but like, find those angels in your life and like have them pull you up and have them pull you out. You are not alone in this. We're also so invisible, you know, so invisible, but you're not alone at all.
Thank you both, Christie and Bryan, so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Let's give them a round of applause, everybody. Don't forget, you can still meet and greet with them outside at the cocktail reception. Thank you both so very much for just being here, sharing your stories. It's been tremendous to get to know both of you. Thank you.